My guest today is a broadcaster for the 2023 World Series champs, the Texas Rangers. He's one of the absolute best in the business, Jared Sandler. Jared, I was looking online, and I'm not sure how many people know this about you, but I thought it was really cool. I heard that you're a big fan of the TV show Gossip Girl. How did you become a fan of that show? I just have to ask.
Yeah, I am. Well, uh, maybe there's a 14 or 15-year-old boy out there who can relate, but I was about 14 years old. I developed a major crush on Blake Lively, the actress, and still to this day, she is my Hollywood crush, my celebrity crush. And so around that time, I saw the movie Accepted. She starred in with Justin Long. I'm proud or embarrassed, or I don't know to say I've seen all of the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants movies, but I didn't realize that she was in this TV show called Gossip Girl. And honestly, I eventually then picked up on it because I was a big fan of hers. But I started watching Gossip Girl in, I want to say it was maybe my senior year of college is when I committed to it. And then it helped get me through my first summer broadcasting in Great Falls, Montana with the Great Falls Voyagers, where we would, routinely have lengthy bus trips. And I'm also not sure that we had a working TV at the apartment I lived in that summer for 3 months. And so streaming wasn't as big of a deal back then. I think you still were kind of back in the, and Sam, I don't even know if you're old enough to remember this. Maybe you are, but Netflix started as a CD operation, and you would get a CD or a DVD, I should say, and then you would return it, send it back in, and get the new one. And I think streaming was just starting on Netflix, and certainly there were not people who had cut the cord by any means. And so the idea that you're going to consume a lot of programming via the internet in that fashion was not commonplace. But Netflix had just started a streaming operation, so I would watch Gossip Girl, either on the DVDs or streaming. And listen, Blake Lively is what drew me in, but it was a guilty pleasure show. I loved it, and I was really sad when the final season came about. And then I remember that finale of the show, the series finale, and they reveal who Gossip Girl is. And I won't give away any spoilers, but it was really exciting. It was kind of rewarding because you commit so much time to a show that's got several seasons, and you get the payoff at the end. It was fun. I enjoyed it. But Blake Lively is what drew me in, what probably kept me going at times when I thought this show kind of is a little ridiculous, right? But I think she's gorgeous, and I'll watch anything that she's in.
Yep. There you go. There you go. Are there any current TV shows that you've been watching lately?
Yeah, so I think TV shows definitely help get me through the baseball season. I shouldn't say get me through, as it's a challenge, but I do a lot more reading in the off season than I do during the baseball season. I find that during the season after a game, if there's not a sporting event on or something, I enjoy watching a TV show, whether it's one that makes you think or it's mindless. So I'm always Netflix, whatever's new there, or whatever other streaming services that have good program. I'm trying to think. Uh, I the ones that I've really committed to here over the last couple of years. I got into Suits like a lot of people did when it became available on Netflix. I did not watch it uh, as it was actively being released, but I love Suits. Ted Lasso, like a lot of folks. I'm currently watching Shrinking on Apple TV. Uh, my wife likes the show Found, which is a Peacock show, and so I'll watch that with her. And then another kind of guilty pleasure, I'll watch this with my wife. She gets geeked up over it, and it's not a bad show to watch and make her feel like she's the one that's getting to choose this show, so that gives me the ability afterwards. Say, all right, now, hey, we're gonna watch something I want to watch. But I do enjoy Emily in Paris, and I actually went to college at a former conference rival of yours, Sam, at USC with Lily Collins, who's the star of Emily in Paris. So it's really cool to watch her on such a big stage. So then the Hard Knocks stuff, and the various kind of behind the scenes sports shows I really enjoy. And then I also I guess the new NBA show, I think it's called Starters or whatever on Netflix. I'm starting to watch that too. So I'll watch anything and everything. I do love a good show that really makes you think. The Perfect Couple is one that I recently wrapped up on Netflix. I think it was a one season limited series type of show. But I love the murder mystery ones that make you think. Those are a lot of fun too.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. There's so many TV shows out there, right? With obviously in this streaming age that we're in, there's so many options. There's so much out there to consume. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, no, it really is crazy how quickly these companies are able to produce these shows, and there's a lot of there's a lot of fat, so to speak, and what I might think of as fat in terms of the stuff that just is kind of a waste, other people love, and the stuff that I love, other people might think is silly, and so there's not a right or wrong. It's ice cream flavors. We all have our various tastes, but it is crazy the amount of programming that is out there, and frankly, it definitely has some sort of an overlap in the Venn diagram with the broadcast industry, just because I think teams and leagues have been, more open to creating some programming themselves, and using programming to connect with fans and maybe to attract new fans, much like, during the pandemic, Drive to Survive really opened a lot of people's eyes to the F1, the Formula One series. And that show did such a great job of making you feel like you knew what was going on, and connecting you with the drivers. And I know that there were some serious upticks in engagement, because of that show. And I think sports leagues and teams, if they, aren't trying to take advantage of that, are probably doing a disservice to themselves.
Now, while unfortunately the Rangers couldn't defend their championship in this postseason that's currently ongoing, just this year we were able to look up into the rafters of Globe Life Field and see a big, beautiful World Series banner up there. Just were there any moments throughout this past season where you just reminded yourself that, hey, we finally did it. We won the World Series.
Yeah, there were a ton. I mean, so first of all, obviously that opening weekend where you've got the banner unveiling and the ring ceremony, and then the various replica World Series ring giveaway nights, and just going to different ballparks and seeing people for the first time since winning the World Series, or teams and various personnel coming to us and just asking about it, reliving it. It's one of those things, that we all have things that pop up in our life, good, bad, or indifferent, where you're going to get asked about it a lot. And at some point, it kind of becomes a little bit tiring to give the same exact answer over and over. But that just never felt like the case with this. It was always fun to answer questions about it, or to talk to people about it. I'll be honest with you, Sam. I always felt, from a baseball standpoint, baseball people with various organizations, I always felt a lot more comfortable talking about it with people who had also experienced it, as opposed to those who maybe had been around for a bit, but hadn't had that pleasure of being a part of a World Series winning team. For one, I didn't do anything to contribute to it. I just rode the coattails of all the men and women who put in hours and hours and hours to help the product on the field. But I never wanted it to be, hey, look what I did, and look at me, because again, I just was along for the ride. But always enjoyed it. Looking up at the banner, you're right. And talking to people, just in the community, and asking about it, or when someone asks about, the ring, and I don't wear my ring ever, but Bruce Bochy gave me some great advice. I kind of, myself and a couple other people were talking to him, and sort of thought that he probably had his World Series rings with the Giants locked up somewhere. And, he said, initially he did, but then I don't remember if it was his wife or if he came to the realization or someone shared with him that what's the fun if you're just going to have them locked away and you're never going to see them or interact with the ring. And so I have the ring. It's in a box. The box is not open, but it's very easy to open. Just pop it open in my house, and makes it easy if I go speak to a class and they want me to bring the ring. I'm happy to share it with people because I think the ability to connect with people over sports in any fashion is a really special thing. And in this capacity as a broadcaster, connecting with fans who maybe want to see what a ring looks like up close and personal. I mean, it's special, and I'm very blessed to be able to be in that position. And so, yeah, I mean, the World Series is a gift that keeps on giving. I'd say that the final real active chapter of it was going to the White House late in the season. But it's always going to be a part of my mind, and I'm sure the minds of several others. And hopefully we can do it again and experience a different journey with a similar outcome. But if not, if it's going to be a while until the next one, or if there never is a next one, I'm just grateful that I got to be a part of one, and I'm grateful that Rangers fans got to experience it as well.
Yes, for sure. Just to talk a bit about your experiences during Game 5 in Phoenix last year, when Spores struck out Marte to finally get that last strike, and you're standing next to Emily Jones, you're getting ready to go on the field for the post-game interviews that you did. Great job on those, by the way. I was listening to those after the game. With kind of everything, going on there, what was just going through your mind at that moment?
Yeah, a lot. I so I woke up that morning with a feeling that sadly was similar to the feeling of Game 7 in 2011, which was, we kind of know the result of this, right? It just felt like in 2011, and I wasn't as connected, right? I was just a fan. But after the heartbreak of Game 6, it almost seemed as if, well, the Rangers aren't going to win Game 7. I remember that day, the day before and the day of, with that postponement with the weather that never really happened. But I remember thinking, why are people acting as if this is signed, sealed, and delivered? And I remember thinking that the Rangers have a chance. Like, what? I mean, they can still come back and win this game. And they actually took a lead in that game, right? And they could have. They definitely could have. They definitely could have won that game, but they didn't. And the Cardinals controlled that game. And so the idea that the Rangers just were dead men walking, I guess, came to be true. But I remember waking up Game 5, the morning of Game 5, with a feeling of, we're winning this. It's over. Eovaldi was pitching that night, even though Zach Gallen was going for the Diamondbacks. There was just a feeling that we were going to do it that night. And I actually remember texting Eric and Matt, and I'm somewhat superstitious on certain things. It's not consistent. But I texted them and said, guys, I have a good feeling we're going to win. I'm going to go to a nearby liquor store or wherever it was to get something to celebrate in the event that we won, right? It wasn't like, oh, we're going to win. But it was, if we do, let's be prepared. And we got some champagne, and I think they both had the same feeling as well. And I was comfortable talking about it with them. I wasn't necessarily going to go up to some of the players and be like, hey, it's over, right? So it started with that. I took everything in that day as if that was going to be the night that it happened. And, fast forward to the game, as you probably recall, Sam, but, maybe people tuning in might not. The Rangers didn't have a hit for the first 5-6 innings. And the Diamondbacks, while they hadn't scored, I mean, they had opportunity after opportunity. And it just kind of felt like, all right, this game is even unfolding in a way where it seems like our night. Because eventually you knew that you felt like they were going to break through. And, fittingly, Corey Seager with an infield single. And then that inning, Mitch Garver singles him home. The Rangers get the lead. And at that point, it felt like it was going to happen. However, go down right next to the home dugout, which was the area in which they were funneling some of the media onto the field. And That's not something that typically happens, for a regular season game, but for postseason games, there's always a bunch of rights holders who go on the field. And typically, Sam, you're in a tunnel and you don't necessarily have a great sight of the field. And it depends ballpark to ballpark. But Emily Jones and I asked a guy named Chuck Torres, who was sort of the representative from Major League Baseball in charge of corralling all these people, if we could get up beyond where they typically held us so that we could see this. And he was very gracious enough to allow us to do that. And I think we both were incredibly nervous because a 1-run lead, and with the history of the Rangers, that doesn't mean anything. But then once the Rangers added the runs, the 4 runs in the ninth, and Jonah Heim had the base hit to center that Alec Thomas misplayed, and then eventually Marcus with the home run. I just remember looking at Emily, and she is far more superstitious, or certainly was that postseason than I was and what I am. But I just looked at her. I said, Emily, this is happening. And she knew it. She kind of told me, shut up, like, don't say that, but she knew it. And that bottom of the ninth, it was just like, all right, Josh, let's do this. Because there was no hesitation or concern as to whether or not he was going to get the job done with the way he had pitched that postseason. And when he threw that breaking ball to Ketel Marte, and Ketel Marte was rung up on strikes, it was like this feeling inside of me that I can't describe, balanced with the rush of, hey, I got a job to do. I got to get on the field and figure out the chaos and get these interviews and do the best job that I can, mixed as well with, I'm a lifelong Rangers fan and they just won the World Series, right? And I don't think that the emotions really came out until we got into the clubhouse. I'd say on the field, there were a lot of hugs that were given out. And so it definitely started to bleed out then. But in the clubhouse, getting to share some moments mixed in with the interviews with some of those guys. In the booth afterwards, when I went up and got to share it with Eric and Matt. And then afterwards that night when we went back to the hotel, and the whole organization that was there just celebrated. And it was such a memorable experience, and something that, like I said earlier, I hope I never, as I get older and older and lose some memories, I hope those are memories I never lose. And those feelings are feelings I never forget.
I remember watching the champagne celebration, in the clubhouse, and I just remember the players singing along to Creed.
Yeah.
That was so awesome. I will say this: I never expected that I would associate Creed with the Rangers winning the World Series, but here we are.
So, Sam, I'll tell you now that we're far enough removed how that all went down. So I'm very fortunate that really in my 10 years of doing this, and I'm sure it'd be similar with other organizations and other clubhouses, but we have largely had some really, really good guys who wear the uniform, and guys who, have been willing to allow people like myself into their lives and into their circles of trust. And it makes the job that much more enjoyable. It allows me to do the job better because I can better connect these players with the fans, through storytelling. But, these are people you're around every single day for about 7 to 8 months, it seems like. And you travel with them, the whole cliche, you spend more time with them than you do with your family is true. And frankly, you spend more time sometimes with their family than you do maybe your friends, because the families will travel, and you really get to know these people as people. And I think with that comes a level of trust and respect, mutual respect. And you definitely feel that during a playoff run. I mean, you're really all in it together. And so I say all that to say I've been fortunate that there are players who are willing to share things. And after the Rangers beat Tampa, we went to Baltimore, and I think maybe we got in. I don't remember. I know we definitely had one full day in Baltimore before game one. But by beating Tampa, it was a guarantee now that the Rangers would have a home playoff game, the first home playoff game since 2016. And so I sent a tweet to fans, and it was something along the lines of, hey fans, what would you share with your fellow fans about, making Globe Life Field a great atmosphere or something like that. And it was kind of for fun, but it was also done with the intention. It was done with the intention that, all right, maybe some fans see certain things and something comes of it. And so I'm sitting there in the hotel room, and Andrew Heaney sends me a text, and I don't know. I wish I saved the text, but he basically sent me a text that said, "Hey, you should know that, or he quoted the tweet and said, I thought maybe you'd like to know that we have been listening to Creed." Uh, and he, I'm trying to find it. Uh, yeah, he said, "Hey, I saw your post. I have a great idea about the sing along in the stadium," because I think that was one of the things that we had talked about is having like a cool sing along that was specific to the Rangers. And he said, "We've been blaring Creed pregame almost all year. If they played the Higher or One Last Breath chorus as a sing along, it would be electric. The guys would love it, and hopefully the fans would too." And so I then called Andrew and we talked about it because we would need the fans to understand why Creed was being played. Creed of all bands, right? And so we decided, all right, I think we knew at the time that Andrew was going to start game one against the Orioles. So that next day, the workout day, I was going to do my pregame interview with Andrew. I would never do that the day he started. And I said, Andrew, this has got to be, it's got to come off as organic, and it needs to come from you, right? It shouldn't come from me. I don't need to be involved. I don't need the credit for it. So I asked him a question, knowing the direction he was going to take it, about what have the guys been rallying behind anything, and he talked about Creed. So I then sent out a tweet right after that interview aired, with a picture of Scott Stapp from Texas Stadium when he performed at Thanksgiving for a Cowboys game. And, hey, there's like breaking Creed, blah, 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 something about how, Creed was the rallying cry. And I tipped off a few people like, hey, do you mind retweeting this tweet? It'd be cool if we developed an atmosphere, and ended up reaching out to a bunch of media folks in the area, and it took off. It took off in a way that none of us ever would have expected. And all of a sudden it became a thing, and it was mind blowing. It was absolutely crazy that this took off the way it did. And it was really, really neat to see how the Rangers fan base were able to connect with the players. Because I'll be honest with you, Sam, a part of what made this group, I think, so great. I think a part of what makes any group great is they're true to who they are. If they're a goofy bunch, they're a goofy bunch. If they're a serious bunch, they're a serious bunch. And every clubhouse has a mix of personalities. But this group largely, at least, when it comes to their big name players, is a pretty stoic group that is very locked in and focused. Corey Seager, Marcus Semien, Nathan Eovaldi. These are guys, they have personalities, but they are not, it's not Elvis or Derek Holland, right? And so I think, in 2010, you had the Claw and Antlers, and you could really rally behind that. This was kind of that thing. I think Rangers fans were thirsty for something that allowed them to identify with the team. And I think the reason it took off was that became that rallying cry, that the fans felt like, hey, we're all in it together, right? And having Creed at one of the Astros games, and the way, hearing the ballpark sing Creed when they would play. I mean, it was really, really neat. And I know the players enjoyed it, and it was really cool how that all came to be. And hopefully one day we can have another version of Creed, and get the fan base really excited about something.
Yes, for sure. And of course, obviously, like obviously the moment was, of course, special for you personally, uh, going back to your childhood of being a Rangers fan growing up, and then being able to be a part of broadcasting a championship. Were there times during the World Series and even following the win that you took time to reflect on those childhood memories?
Yeah, I did. And I think what made that easier was hearing, other fans do the same. And talking about what the Rangers meant to them, or how it connected them to maybe a family member who is no longer alive, or maybe it was about how the Rangers back in 2006 helped them get through a hard time, or maybe how the 2023 Rangers helped them get through a hard time, and just all the ways that sports can be meaningful, a team, and your passion for that team, and the distraction or the joy or all of it, can really play a role. And yeah, I mean, I 2011, even though I wasn't working for the Rangers at that time, 2011 did not like, and I'm not saying I'm unique in this, but like, I did not like bringing it up, talking about it. I remember when the Cardinals came to town in 2023, I dreaded that. I dread any reminder, or dreaded any reminder of 2011. It's Listen, 2011 still happened, and it still was heartbreaking, but it's softened a little bit. But yeah, I think about the first game I ever remember going to, the Rangers and the then Indians, and Kevin Gross was the starting pitcher. And I guess I went to games at Arlington Stadium, but I was too young to remember. And I think of going to some of my July 4th games. I think of Ira Tobolowsky, who is, one of my best friend's dads, who was like a dad to me, who was tragically murdered back in 2016. And how much him taking us to those July 4th games meant. And I think of my dad, and the way that, baseball is a part of my relationship with my dad, and everything that, really, I think, Sam, and I don't want to get emotional thinking about it, but everything that my dad did uh, as a sacrifice to try and give me an opportunity to chase my dreams as a broadcaster, but also knowing now, when I would ask my dad to get to the ballpark early so I could try and chase down balls in batting practice, now as an adult, knowing that, all right, well, you got to leave work early and you got to drive down to Arlington. And he's just going to sit there for a couple I mean, that's a commitment, right? But he would always do it. And I think about that. I think about Rangers fans. I said it all throughout the postseason. I think about, it's about the people, right? I think about Eric Nadel. I think about, I think about John Daniels, and Nelson Cruz, and people who, maybe the World Series, it was bittersweet for them, but, now that there is some, vindication or validation, or relief. I think about the Ranger fan who's been around since 72. I think about the Ranger fan who followed the team in terms of their fandom from, their Senators days. And yeah, I thought about a lot, and I still sometimes do, because the way I've always approached it, Sam, I'm not that all Rangers fans desire to be a broadcaster. I have people that'll tell me, "Hey, it's so cool that you're broadcasting for the Rangers. I'm a big Rangers fan," and maybe they don't, never really wanted to be a broadcaster, but I feel like, as a genuine Rangers fan, I want to connect the team to the people, and I want to. I think I do have some of those same emotions, and I never want to lose sight of what it means to be a fan. Uh, and I think going through that experience only amplified that and exacerbated that. And yeah, I think being a fan, Sam, is incredibly special. Whether it's the Rangers, the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Cleveland Brown, it doesn't matter. Good, bad. You got a passion for something or someone. That's really special. And I don't ever want to take that for granted.
Going off my previous question, just getting to share that moment with Eric, someone that you grew up listening to, and then you got to have him as a mentor. Just what did that mean to you to share that moment with him?
Man, it meant a lot. It really did. The two most influential people probably uh, in my life. I don't want to discount my brother. I mean, my brothers are immensely instrumental, but in terms of if I were to really like think of it through the lens of broadcasting, it's my dad, because my dad just instilled this belief in me that like I could do this. And broadcasting is very cutthroat, and there are a lot of moments where you're like, how am I going to rise above all these people? And the reality is there's a lot of luck involved, and I've benefited from that, no doubt. But I never really got to a point where I wanted to quit or got dejected. And I think had my dad ever put some sort of level of pressure on me, or, listen, he could have very easily had this conversation with me saying, son, there are a lot of people who want to do this. There aren't a lot of jobs. You need to have a backup plan. Even like planting that seed in my head, I think would have, created some level of doubt. But he never really had that sort of sentiment. He never put any sort of pressure on me. He never said, "Hey, son, making $30,000 a year in Midland, Michigan just isn't going to cut it. If you can't get a better job in a couple of years, then you should probably think about changing court." Like none of that, right? Uh, and just everything he sacrificed his entire life. The other person's Eric. From listening to Eric before I ever met him, growing up, going to sleep with my little radio next to my bed. Back when I used to love the West Coast games, because that meant that chances are I wouldn't fall asleep before the game ended. I didn't always make it to the end of those games, but I knew that I was falling asleep listening to baseball, or how rain delays would prolong that window of baseball listening. And I didn't really, when I was 7, 8, 9, 10, however many years old, it wasn't like I was listening thinking this is what I want to do. I just was listening because I loved the Rangers, and developed a love and appreciation for the people who were talking to me about the Rangers. And Eric, obviously was a constant. And then I got to meet him, and he became a mentor of mine, and really, really did help in so many ways, and teaching me and getting me to understand, philosophies and the art of broadcasting. And yeah, getting to work with him has been a dream come true. And, that's when I really got emotional that night, was when I got back up to the booth, and I got to share, the only thing I regret's probably too strong of a word. Because of the job, I was down on the field and in the clubhouse for all of this. I didn't get to share it with Eric and Matt until after that, but got up to the booth and we talked, and getting to share that with them was meaningful. And, getting to share that with Eric, who's, like another dad, uncle. I mean, they're family, right? I don't know how to define it with a label, but I mean, our relationship is incredibly special. And at least it is to me, and hopefully he'd say the same. And I just knew how much it pained him that 2011 happened, and that he had not been a part of a World Series team. And it was always something that bothered me. And Matt and I would have these conversations that Eric might retire without ever having been a part of a World Series team. And that always bothered us. And I know it bothered Eric. I know that it was something that was meaningful to him, as it should be. And I just always thought about how, the Rangers are, I think, going to win a World Series eventually. It should be with Eric. It should be with Eric's voice on that final call. It shouldn't be with anyone else. And the fear that that would never happen, I think, was powerful. And you could feel the relief and the excitement, and everything Eric had been through that year. He missed the first several months. He was dealing with some mental health issues, and that was, I think, that probably added to the emotion, knowing that, we weren't sure at times during that stretch if or when he'd be back. And to have him there, to have him be a part of it, to have him, have his voice behind that call, I think was meaningful to a lot of us. I know it was meaningful to him, but it was meaningful to a lot of us as well, because he is such a big part and has been such a big part of Rangers baseball for fans. And it wouldn't be right if it was anyone else's voice on the call of the very first World Series for this team. And so that was really special.
Hmm. You've talked before about how early on Eric would talk with you about the importance of making mistakes, and and dealing with making mistakes. For you, what was the process like of learning how to just, roll with the punches and carry on?
It's tough. Uh, it was very tough. I mean, so there are a few things in play here. One, I am painfully competitive. I do not like losing anything. I don't care. I mean, my wife has taught me to play a game called Mahjong, and I've only played a few times, and it's not something I plan on playing a ton, but if it's a way for me to spend time with her, whatever, I'll do it. My sister-in-law plays, and they play a ton. I've like maybe played twice. Last night was like the third time I'd ever played, and I was furious that I couldn't win. I mean, I shouldn't win. I'm playing with these people who play regularly, right? But like I do not like losing, and I am a perfectionist. I know I'm not perfect. I know I'm far from it. I'm an incredibly flawed individual, but uh yeah, I don't like making mistakes. Uh, I didn't back then, right? I don't want to say I like making mistakes now, but it just doesn't phase me anymore. If it's just your average run of the mill mistake, but there's a balance of taking pride and getting things right. If I trip over a word, I don't care anymore. If I misrepresent a story, that bothers me, right? Like that's not a mistake that needs to be made. I think there, categories of mistakes, but that in combination with this fear that there are thousands of people around the country who want, one of these very, few available jobs. And so when I was in college and early, doing summer league baseball, it just felt like if I'm making mistakes, and there's probably 100 kids who aren't making these mistakes. I'm so far down on the depth chart, right? I think some people have the disposition and the freedom uh, to know that that's not the reality. But I was trapped inside the reality in which that was the case. That every mistake I'm dropping down, and I'll never forget. I'll tell you a quick story, Sam. At my last game, broadcasting for the Brainerd Lakes Area Lunkers in the Northwoods League in Brainerd, Minnesota. We're up in the press box. The press box in our broadcast booth had a counter that was, normal counter height, and then like a second counter on top where you could put a whatever, anything you want, a pen, a cup, what have you. And it was tradition for the final game of that season in the press box, you shotgun a beer with, your press box groups. That's the official score, the public address announcer, the visiting broadcaster, if they like. And then, I participated. I wasn't a huge drinker, so shotgun and a beer moments before first pitch, and I wasn't, 100%. And so I'm reading the starting lineups, and I tripped over a name, and for whatever reason, God forbid I made a mistake. Like I was above making a mistake. I got so upset that I tripped over a name, and I pounded my fist on the counter, and my water toppled over onto my computer. And I knew that moment my computer was done. And like I'm now dealing with the, oh my gosh, did I just lose everything and blah blah blah. But I'm about to start a broadcast. I can't deal with it. So I spent that entire broadcast knowing that I probably just, messed up my entire computer. I probably have lost a lot of information. I'm now going to have to get a new computer. In a day, I'm driving back to USC for my senior year. When am I going to get this new computer and set it all up? And all because I could not make, I mean, heaven forbid I made a mistake. And so that was a good lesson. My dad and I had to take a little bit of a detour going from Brainerd to LA. We stopped in Minneapolis at the Mall of America, the Apple store, and got a new computer. And thankfully, I don't really remember how much of a pain in the butt it was to get it all reset up, but I'm sure it was. And then you move on to just the general idea that as a broadcaster, your demo tape is important. And every opportunity you're on air is an opportunity to get better and an opportunity to put together that demo tape. But you can't paralyze yourself by thinking that, every time you're on air is that moment, right? It can be, but the more you at least for me, the more I thought about it, the more I was so caught up in being perfect that it just made my broadcasting worse. And so whether it's dealing with making just your average run of the mill mistake, tripping over a word or whatever it might be, stuttering briefly, or it's the idea that you've got to be perfect because that can be a demo tape. That stuff for me wasn't healthy. It wasn't until I took my foot off that pedal in terms of the pressure I was putting on myself that I actually grew and got better as a broadcaster. It wasn't that I was trying any less hard or that I didn't care as much. It's that the care and the energy that I was committing was all being directed in the right places. And I think for me, understanding that the expectation is not that I'm going to be perfect, and embracing that really allowed broadcasting to become fun again. Once I got in this spin cycle of trying to climb the broadcasting ladder, I lost sight for a year and a half of broadcasting being fun because I was approaching each broadcast as an opportunity for me to take the next step instead of just being where my feet were and enjoying broadcasting that day and that night and naturally allowing that joy to allow my broadcasts to get better.
Now, sort of going off that, when you were in college, just what was the process like for you, really developing your broadcasting skills and, and also preparing for broadcasts as well? Because I'm sure, as you know, the preparation for the broadcast, no, in many ways is more time consuming and even in some ways more important than even just what the actual call is.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that's evolved and still is evolving, right? I'm still learning all the time how I want to best prepare, what makes sense. Some of that's tied into the fact that, we've got all sorts of different sources of information and which ones are valuable, which ones aren't, which ones I turn to in this spot, which ones I turn to in that spot. And then understanding what I find joy in, because the cool thing about broadcasting sports and the preparation is that, yeah, there's certain things you definitely need to know, but after that, it's kind of up to you. What do you think is interesting? And a lot of times, if you find it interesting, you're going to present it with a level of enthusiasm that consciously or subconsciously the listener is going to be drawn to. And you know, it's something that gets said a lot, whether it's with sports talk or broadcasting. If you find it interesting, then other people have a chance to find it interesting as well. That's not true across the board in every scenario, right? I can't just go on air and talk about how Corey Seager is batting and he is a fan of snails. And then I talk about the history of snails, right? But maybe, I don't know. And Corey's not a fan of snails to my knowledge. That was random. But if there's a story or a stat that becomes a story, any of that stuff, if you care about it, then you're going to enjoy the grind of preparing and you're going to enjoy presenting it. I mean, the way I share with people is like, for me, when I was in school and I would get assigned a book to read or a chapter in a history textbook, I might not find it interesting and it might stink because I don't really like it and I'm really having to labor through it if I did read it at all. But when I get to choose the book I read or choose the information that I pursue, I'm enjoying it and it's fun and I learn more and it's just a better experience. That's with preparing. I've learned. I didn't learn it at first. I thought there was a way you needed to do it and this and that. There's not one right way. The right way is the right way that makes sense for you. And as long as you're telling the story of what's going on in the game, all the other stuff, you got a lot of freedom. And I think that was an important lesson for me to learn, that my preparation should be directed in a way that is interesting to me. The one thing I do think is important is that while numbers are such a big part of sports, numbers on their own are boring. If I just sit there for 3 hours and inundate you with number after number after number, that only can do so much. That can only tell so much of the story. There is always a story behind a number, and it's your job as a broadcaster, I think, to try and uncover those stories. Now, the people who can give you that information might not always cooperate or be willing to share, and that's okay. But you should always ask. And an example, something very simple. I can sit here and tell you that Joe Bob's batting average is 50 points higher this year than it was last year. And if that's all I tell you, all right, you know that Joe Bob's having a better season this year than last year. But why? Why is he hitting better? Is there anything interesting behind that? And maybe Joe Bob tells you, I don't know. And, maybe that's I asked Joe Bob's having a career year. I asked him, he's like, I don't know. I'm not doing anything differently. All right, well, there you go. That's maybe your story. And maybe I then go to hitting coaches or whatever, and they tell you, no, he's made a change here or this or that. Or maybe he gives you some really interesting story about how, he reconnected with his high school hitting coach over the offseason, and it took him back to, when baseball was just going out and playing with your friends. And, it wasn't a big mechanical thing, but he re-energized and rediscovered a love for baseball. All right, well, there you go. That's cool. I'm now given a story behind that. And that's the one thing that to me is somewhat of a non-negotiable. You're not going to find the story behind every single number, and not every number is going to have an interesting story. But if all you're doing is presenting numbers without ever pursuing the story that might be tied to those numbers, I think you're doing a disservice.
You've talked before, sort of about how big it was to get experience early on in your freshman year at USC. And I read that the first game you called, it was USC versus Duke in volleyball. What was your mindset going into that? And then what was the overall experience like for that first call that you had?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I walked out of it thinking, I had this all figured out, but I didn't. And I need to, I need to figure out if I can in any way, shape, or form access that, because for a time I had it and I would go back and listen, and it was awful. But I'm very grateful to Jeff Platt, who now is big in Las Vegas and the poker scene, not only as a competitor, but as a broadcaster. And anyone in the poker world, I think, knows who Jeff is. But he's from Plano, Texas, and was a senior when I was a freshman at USC, and he was in charge of scheduling the students. And I connected with him that summer and probably annoyed the crap out of him, letting him know that I was coming to USC and I wanted to get involved. And I didn't know who he was from Adam. He didn't know me. But I was an eager freshman, and someone had dropped out. I forget the circumstances, but Jeff needed someone to fill that void last minute. He asked me, and I knew just enough about volleyball to where I didn't have to learn the sport at a very, very basic level, but I knew nothing about volleyball at a level that was commensurate to that of someone who'd be broadcasting the sport. But I did my best. I had fun, and I did a few women's volleyball games the matches that year. I did a number of them. And after my second one, I got an email from a lady named Cookie Stevens, who was an assistant coach. And, I thought Cookie was going to email me, tell me how great I was. And I was feeling myself. And the first line was probably saying, Jared, really enjoyed having you broadcasting. But then basically after that, it was essentially, you don't really know what you're talking about. Let's get together so that we can work on that. She put it in a much more delicate and gentle way. I think she, said, hey, some of the terms you're using aren't necessarily accurate or used in the right way. Would love to sit down and talk to you. And that was awesome. I haven't spoken to Cookie Stevens in forever. I'd love to connect with her at some point. But that was really meaningful because clearly she could have ripped me and blasted me, but it made me feel comfortable broadcasting those games in a sport that I really didn't know a ton about. And that was a really, really cool experience because of that. And, I broadcast baseball and basketball now. I don't do any football anymore, though I did love getting to do that. But I have some great memories and experiences broadcasting college sports and some of the non-major revenue sports as well, just because a lot of those people were so happy to have people broadcasting their games or their matches, and they wanted you to succeed, and they were very supportive. Whereas, while I enjoyed my time with Pete Carroll at USC, Pete Carroll wasn't going and listening to my student broadcasts and helping me break down some of my assessments, right? And not that he should have, but there was a little bit of a more intimate feel with some of these other sports, and women's volleyball at USC was definitely one of them.
Hmm. You were also a team manager for USC baseball during your days in college. What memories do you have from that experience?
A ton. We could do another hour on that, Sam. I That was such a big part of my college experience. I played sports throughout high school. I was, athletic enough to have some opportunities to play in college at smaller schools, but certainly not athletic enough to have Division I schools knocking on my door. And baseball was one of the sports I played, and USC offered me the opportunity to essentially extend my time playing baseball without actually playing, and being a manager and being in the dugout and putting a uniform on, and being a part of a team. And some of those guys, to this day are some of my closest friends. And, I think being in the baseball world definitely helped. Scott Boris's son, Shane, who's a good friend of mine, was on, those teams. And I got to know Scott. And he's a fascinatingly intelligent human being. And I got to know a gentleman by the name of Bobby Brett, George Brett's brother, because Bobby's son Bo played at USC, and Bobby helped me get my first two broadcasting jobs indirectly by connecting me with this person or that person. And it was just so much fun. I mean, we weren't very good in my 4 years, especially relative to the standard that had been set by that program historically, but it was a blast. I really had a great time, met some amazing people. And I put in a lot of long hours doing some laundry and helping out with recruiting logistics and operations and all of that stuff. And whether it was watching some of our guys compete or watching some of the great players we got to play against, it was definitely a blast.
Now, later on, you became a broadcaster for the Great Falls Voyagers. And what's interesting is that 2023 was not the first time you'd been a part of a championship team, because the Voyagers won the Pioneer League Championship in 2011. You got to be a part of that. What do you recall from that championship run?
Uh, Yeah, I recall that that team wasn't very good when it came to prospects, right? There wasn't a team full of big time, highly sought after prospects. It was a lot of college guys who maybe weren't big time draft picks. We had a few guys who ended up playing Major League Baseball. The guy who probably had the most successful career, he's still pitching, is a guy named Chris Stavensky. Uh, there were some higher picks. A guy named Eric Johnson out of Cal who played in the majors, but he had injuries and never quite had the type of career I think some might have expected. Oddly enough, Marcus Semien was drafted by the White Sox in that year and almost was sent to Great Falls, but they ended up sending him to full season ball because he was a little more established in their eyes, and maybe uh, wasn't as much or as needed of a fit down there. One of the cool things was one of my best friends at USC was a guy named Joe DePinto, and he played on that team and was a really good player for that team. I think he won the team MVP that year. But yeah, the team wasn't very good in the first half, but things really kind of clicked and came together in the second half. And they had this great bullpen combination of Winarski, Dvorsky, and Davensky. And so uh, it was a lot of fun, and we played the Ogden Raptors in the finals and had a long bus trip to get there and to get back. Uh, After we beat Missoula in the semifinals, there was a bit of a skirmish out in the town that night in which a guy pulled a knife on one of our players and it caused a big scene, and that was kind of bizarre. And yeah, I mean that was a real experience in a small town, and long bus trips, and it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. And got to meet again, got to meet some really neat people along the way, and definitely had some learning moments, some teaching moments, but getting to call a championship was really cool. And I kind of stole Chuck Cooperstein's call from months prior, from literally that June, that previous June. The Mavs won the NBA championship, and Chuck Cooperstein talked about planting the flag at the top of the mountain. So I think my call with the Voyagers was something similar. I figured in Montana they probably hadn't heard Chuck Cooperstein's call, so I could get away with it. But yeah, it was a really fun summer.
Yeah, absolutely. Then so we've talked about Great Falls a bit. Then later on, you found yourself in Midland, Michigan, where you got to do kind of a variety of things. I mean, you did broadcasting for the Great Lakes Loons, and then you also got to do play-by-play for other sports. You hosted a radio show called Crunch Time. How important was it for you to be able to to do various things in broadcasting during that time?
Yeah, it was it's weird, Sam. There's certain things that happen in your life that are uh super influential, right? And you think, well, I wouldn't be here today without that. And the reality is you don't know. Maybe going to USC, for instance. Uh, I don't know if I would have ended up here had I gone elsewhere. I mean, I'd like to think that I would have put in the same effort and the same commitment and passion going anywhere else. But all I know is that USC was a part of my journey, and there are definite things that I can tie back to USC that have helped me get to this point. Right. I think similarly with the Loons. It's really tough for me to look back on my career and think that I could have gotten to this point without the Loons. Maybe I could have. Again, I'd like to believe that I could have, but I don't know. And yeah, doing multiple things was so huge because the reality is, Sam, I came back to Dallas not to do play by play. It was still what I wanted to do, but I kind of made a career choice that I was going to move back to a major market, and I was going to roll the dice and bet on myself in a familiar major market, right here in DFW, and hope that I could impress people and earn an opportunity. And thankfully, I was able to be at the right place at the right time, and go down that path to working in the capacity I am today with the Rangers. But I came back basically because of my sports talk background, which really I did some sports talk in college, but professionally it was cultivated over the 2 years I was in Michigan. And so I think not being just play by play or not being just baseball play by play helped. And having that sports talk background and getting to do it on a daily basis helped. So, yeah, there's no doubt getting to do multiple sports and multiple disciplines played a huge role in, my ability to pursue different types of jobs that ultimately led to coming back to DFW. And, thankfully I was able to get back on the play by play side of things and be where I am today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you did is so cool. You took that chance. You bet on yourself, and the rest is history. So
Yeah, I mean, and Sam, I'm lucky because maybe it, would not have worked out that way in a different reality, but this is the only reality that I know, and thankfully it did work out, and I'm incredibly grateful for all the people who were a part of that, and then all the luck that seemed to break my way to allow me to get some cool opportunities.
now, in addition to your work as a broadcaster, you're also the founder of the Sandlot Children's Charity, which aims to improve the lives of kids with disabilities through athletic opportunities. And of course, as you know, on December 8th, Swinging for a Cause will be held at Globe Life Field. Would you mind just talking for a bit about this event and where people can find more information about it?
Yeah, so I think I appreciate you asking. So, we support kids with physical and intellectual disabilities, and raise money to allow them to, uh, be able to have some of those opportunities to play sports and get involved athletically and actively because that's a big need. And unfortunately, the cost sometimes is prohibitive. The event, uh, December 8th, like you said, you go to the sandlot.org. You can follow me on Twitter at Jared Sandler. Definitely do a lot of posting about it. We'd love to have people there. You can buy individual tickets, tables, sponsor. The event is at Globe Life Field on the field. And so it's a really cool experience. You get to spend, several hours that day on the field, getting to do things as simple as playing catch, or, playing in a wiffle ball home run derby. We've got activities and events and games for, various sports. We have a 3-point shootout for basketball, a quarterback challenge for football. There's stuff with golf and tennis and pickleball. And then, again, you're just hanging out on the field and get to go into the bullpen and throw a pitch and see how fast you throw it, all those things. So, we think it's a cool experience, and would love to have people out there to give it a shot.
Mm. What does it mean to you that you're able to make a positive impact on the lives of these kids? And when you get the opportunities to interact, with these young athletes, just what impact does that have on you personally?
Yeah. Sam, I appreciate you asking that question in that way, but the impact that we have we have as a charity is a community-wide impact. And I'm just the person who decided to sign some paperwork and put up just a little bit of money to start the charity. There are so many people involved, and I'm thankful our team with Sandlot, our board, and our ambassador group, and then the people who support us through donations and attending our events. It's incredibly rewarding. It's to me what's so much more important than broadcasting a sporting event. There's importance to that too. And I don't discount or discredit, the way, as we talked about earlier, that people connect with sports. I mean, that's valuable and the impact it can have. But, giving back to the community is super important to me. And I'm just fortunate that, I'm lucky. I've got a job that gives me a little bit of a platform, and a platform that allows me to reach a lot of people. And it was always important to me that I use that platform to make a difference. And again, I just, I'm just the person who, like I said, I signed some papers and created this space for people to collaboratively work together to help, impact others. And I'm very humbled and honored to be a part of it. And, the growth and the success of the charity is a testament to others, certainly not to me. And I'm just grateful that I get to be along for the ride and see this charity continue to impact the community.
Well, I have a lot of respect for what you're doing to make to help make a positive impact in the community. I just have a lot of respect for that. I think that is so awesome. Last question here: what is the absolute biggest piece of advice that you have for aspiring sports broadcasters?
Well, I think two things. One, you know, every day is an opportunity for you to get better. A lot of people say you just need reps. And yeah, you need the reps to have those opportunities, but just the reps isn't enough. You need to approach your broadcast each day, whether you have a game or a broadcast or not. Pick one thing and try to get better at it every day, and create scenarios that allow yourself to work on those things specifically, whether it's turning down the sound of a game on TV while you're sitting on your couch, or listening to others and hearing how they handle certain situations. That is huge. Just one thing at a time, every day. Try to get better at something every day or every week, whatever it might be, every month. Even if you get better at one thing every month, you're getting better at 12 things a year. Over the course of 3-4 years, you're talking 36, 48 things. I mean, you are going to get better. But you've got to put in the work. You can't just show up to your broadcast and think that you're going to get better by being there. Yeah, maybe you'll improve a little bit, but you got to have a focus to it. How can I get better? Be willing to listen to feedback. Be willing to listen to someone telling you you're not good at something. Don't let that creep in your mind as if you're never going to be good at it. Use it. That's a good thing. When someone tells you, hey, you're not good at this, you need to get better at this, they're giving you the roadmap to how to improve, right? Find people whose opinions you trust, but those people should not just be the people who tell you that you're good. Those are the people who are going to tell you what you're good at and what you're not good at and be honest with you. And then the other thing is, just have fun, because no one likes listening to someone who is not having fun. And if you are not allowing yourself to be in an environment as a broadcaster, in a headspace where you're having fun, it is going to limit your ability to grow as a broadcaster. So yes, it is a daunting journey. Yes. You're always looking for more and you're ambitious, and that's great and that's necessary. But on top of that, you need to allow yourself to have fun every single day, and allow yourself to enjoy what you're doing, because that is going to allow you to grow and find your voice as a broadcaster.
Well, Jared, I can certainly say this. I've had a ton of fun being able to talk with you today. Of course, as like I said before, as a huge fan of your work, it's been a real honor to talk with you and hear about the amazing experiences that you've had throughout your career. You've obviously put in the hard work, and you continue to do an amazing job.
Well, Sam, I appreciate it. You are as prepared as anyone I've ever come across in an interview, and it was an honor to get to chat with you over the last hour.